Okay, good afternoon all. Welcome to the Revitalising Chalk Rivers webinar. This is part of the CIWEM Catchment Management and Nature-Based series. This webinar is being hosted by the CIWEM Rivers and Coastal Group. Before we make a start, we've just got some general housekeeping. So the webinar will be recorded and you'll be able to find the recording in the CIWEM website YouTube channel. If you do experience any technical issues, if you put your hand up or raise the issue in the chat, there's a member of the CIWEM will reach out to you. We will be taking questions, so please populate the chat with any questions and we'll aim to get through as much as we can at the end of the presentation. This webinar will contribute to 1 hour of your CPD. So just, sorry, already technical. A bit about CIWEM. So CIWEM is a Royal Chartered Professional Body and independent charity. If you want to find out more about CIWEM, you can click on that link and it'll take you to the CIWEM webpage where you'll find their vision and strategy and how you can become a member. So who are CIWEM? So CIWEM's mission is to improve water and environmental management for the public. We are a community of practitioners and visionaries working on issues like adaptation and resilience to climate change, enhancing our built environment and improving water security. A little plug for future CIWEM events. So these are in-person events, and this includes the Flood and Coastal Conference exhibition taking place in person in Liverpool in June. Okay, so welcome to the Revitalising Chalk Rivers presentation from a client's perspective. Our main speakers are Sarah Caleb, who has a background in biology and environmental education. Sarah has 5 years experience managing projects, having joined Affinity Water's river restoration team back in 2020. This has included involvement in all stages of the planning and delivery process, managing projects from conception to construction. You will also hear from Liam Dennis, who is a project manager in the Environment Agency with a background in engagement and stakeholder management. He has been managing Chalk River restoration projects since 2019 and is a member of the APM. And then on the panel will include Nicolas, Gilbert, who is a river restoration project program manager at Affinity Water. He has worked in the water sector for over 16 years in a variety of roles. Nicolas manages a team of project managers who work collaboratively with riparian landowners and key stakeholders to deliver river restoration improvement schemes both in channel and at landscape scale. He's passionate about delivering long-term improvement to our internationally rare chalk streams with a focus on increasing biodiversity and enhancing the environment for future generations. And myself, I'm Celina Rajanayagam. I'm an associate PM at Mott MacDonald. I'm a chartered member of CIWEM and the APM with over 18 years project manager experience. I have worked as a PM for Affinity Water, delivering some of the river restoration projects on the Gade, which you'll hear about today. And I'm more recently project exec for the Gade Bridge project at the Environment Agency. Okay, our agenda. So we'll give you a little introduction to chalk streams, and then we will focus on the Hertfordshire context and catchment overview, and then they'll lead us into the project case study. So we have 6 exciting projects to share with you, and we'll wrap up with some of the key lessons learned from the Gade, and then we'll go into a little bit of a Q&A discussion at the end. Okay, so I'll hand over to you, Liam.
Thanks, Celina. Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending. So we're going to be talking about the River Gade, which is a chalk river. these rivers are globally rare, only about 200 in the world. On the left there, you can see the world's first geological map, and a band of green are wrapping around London. And that's the chalk, that's the area of chalk. And on the right, just to the right of that picture, you can see the network of chalk streams that flow from it. So chalk streams, rarity comes from a complete freak geological story. About 100 million years ago, the area which is now southern England lay beneath a tropical sea, where over millions and millions of years, layers of tiny shells built up into vast beds of chalk. Millions of years later, uplift, erosion exposed this porous rock, allowing rainwater to soak in, travel underground, and emerge as crystal clear springs which form these very, very rare rivers. Because they're fed by groundwater, naturally, these rivers would have remarkable stable flows and temperatures. The water is naturally filtered, and that creates ideal conditions for species, like a range of species, mayflies, brown trout, and obviously the obligatory cute water vole. They're also very evocative of English countryside, if you think of Constable's landscapes or Wind in the Willows and things like that. They're also the crystal clear waters also support an absolute incredible range of wildlife, and some people have called them England's rainforest for their richness of their biodiversity. However, these streams are very fragile, and once they're modified or disconnected from the groundwater, which has happened for millennia for all sorts of reasons, for mills or drains development, they can quickly lose their defining qualities. Sediment can build up, vegetation disappears, and the unique ecosystems and wildlife that depend on them can vanish. So here you've got at the bottom a couple of typically modified chalk streams, often straightened straightened and perched to feed a mill over the years, shaded, and disconnected from the groundwater. It's not very, there's not much life evident there. So it's no surprise then with these, how fragile they are, that only 14% of chalk rivers nationally are in good ecological health, and none in Hertfordshire and North London where we're working. The River Gade is one of these, which is currently classified as poor and suffering from long-term modifications that limit its natural character. On the bottom right there is a diagram taken from the Catchment-based approach chalk stream strategy, which is a really good read and helps define and give a framework to chalk river restoration. It's available online. And it shows that chalk stream or chalk river health depends on three things: water quantity, that's the naturalness of the flow, the connection to the groundwater; water quality, how clean the water is; and physical habitat, so the shape, the structure, the wiggliness of the river and the surrounding landscape. Restoring any one of these individually will help, but the biggest gains from when we improve all three together, so that's what our projects aim to do, by removing or reducing abstraction or reconnecting the rivers back to their groundwater, we can not only boost natural flow, but improve water quality as well. You can then amplify those benefits even more if you renaturalize the natural habitats, if you remove obstructions or weirs or things like that, or if you combat invasive species. So for the rest of the presentation, I'll hand over to Sarah. We'll look at some of the ways that we've been putting in these factors into our restorations through a number of case studies.
Thanks, Liam. So just starting off with a quick note about the Environment Agency and how Affinity Water works with the EA to try and improve our chalk rivers and their health and condition. So the Environment Agency have identified 160 potential projects across 20 rivers within for delivery during the 2025 to 2030 period, and a large proportion of those are partnership projects. Affinity Water also has a river restoration programme, and that is driven by the fact that we abstract groundwater from the chalk aquifer for public supply, and we do that within the Upper Gade catchment in 3 locations. Abstraction across our supply area was the main driver of our river restoration programme when it began with just 6 rivers in 2015. This has now grown in scale, and having delivered 45 projects over the last 10 years, in 2025 to 30, we plan to deliver a further 33 projects across 18 rivers. Not all of them are in catchments that Affinity Water abstract from, and not all of those are within the Herts and North London area either. You can see in the map on the right, the darker green areas are the areas that Affinity Water supplies, and a decent chunk of that in the central section is the Herts and North London Environment Agency area. Alongside river restoration, we also review our abstraction with the Environment Agency to ensure that those abstractions are sustainable both now and in the future. And since 2018, we've reduced our abstraction in the Upper Gade catchment by 6.4 million litres a day on an annual average basis, and we plan to reduce this by a further 12.06 million litres a day by 2030. Thank you. As Liam mentioned, the River Gade is classified as having poor ecological status under the Water Framework Directive. And these images here is some of the information that you can get from the Environment Agency's Catchment Data Explorer. There's a little link down in the bottom right if you wanted to take a look yourself. And that covers the Water Framework Directive classifications for all water bodies in the UK. And we're just focusing on one. The Upper Gade itself lies within the wider gauge catchment. There are 2 water bodies in the Gade. Those then feed into the River Colne, which then feeds into the River Thames, just to give you a geographic idea of where we are. The river was last assessed in 2022, and as we said, it had poor ecological status at that point. The table on the right shows the main reasons for not achieving good, and the top 3 of those are impoundment, abstraction, and urbanisation. And we've already talked about the fact that Affinity Water are reducing and planning to reduce their abstraction further. It's not always possible for river restoration particularly to address all of the reasons for not achieving good, but there are other enhancements that can be made to the river's morphology and habitat. And we'll talk through some of what we've done in the case studies. So we're now going to talk through these projects that have been delivered and attempted on the River Gade in recent years, their pressures and objectives, challenges, outcomes and successes. We'll go in downstream order, starting with 5 Affinity Water projects. Then I'll hand back over to Liam to talk about an Environment Agency project furthest downstream. So we'll start off with the Water End Road Bridge project, which was completed at the beginning of 2025. And the pressures on the river at this point, that there were 2 3-arched bridges with weirs underneath, each impounding a significant stretch of the river, leading to accumulated silt, preventing fish passage. So our objectives were to remove or reduce the impoundment as much as possible to enable fish passage and natural sediment transport as well. Alongside that, we were hoping to do in-channel works, so the installation of berms and large wood deflectors to encourage the formation of a meandering channel. You can see there the image of one of the bridges. There were quite a lot of challenges with this project. So the upstream impoundment is relied upon by a fishery. So modifying that was discounted at quite an early stage in the design process. Both bridges are grade 2 listed, which means that we had to get obviously permission to work under and around those bridges and ensure that we were not harming them in any way. We were working appropriately around them. Ecology was a constraint here. So on lots of our rivers, we have water voles, we may have spawning fish, and there are protected seasons for those species. And sometimes you need licenses in place. With the water voles particularly, they weren't there when we initially surveyed, but they did turn up just before we started construction. So that did cause some delays for us, where we had to stop work and then make sure we had a license in place so that we could disturb the water voles at an appropriate time of year and in an appropriate way, but also try to avoid the spawning fish season later in the year. Construction was mainly in 2024, so the very late months of 2024. And as I'm sure you will remember, it was very wet last year. So that led to a lot of wet ground conditions and high river flows, which made construction much more challenging. while we were removing the weir, we discovered that there was a culvert underneath it, which had not been on any of the plans of the bridge. The bridge was built in around 1880, so it's not entirely surprising that the plans were not up to current standards. But that did, again, cause us to have to pause and reassess what our options were and how to go forward. And the delays as well from the water voles, from the weather, from finding the culvert, meant that the scope of the in-channel works was reduced. So we were able to do works to the weir, but less of the work upstream than we had planned. Thank you. So there were some successes. So we were able to significantly reduce the height of the central weir under the downstream bridge, and that has allowed fish to pass freely. We planted 16 black poplar saplings to augment the existing local population. So this is a rare tree species in the UK, and there were 3 or 4 on site already. We've now added another 16 saplings of both sexes to hopefully boost that population, and hopefully they will be able to seed and increase themselves as well. We've resurveyed, and the water voles have returned to the site a year later, having been displaced last year, and brown trout have been seen swimming up over the weir. So we know that the reduction of that impoundment, the weir height, was successful there. And the impoundment has been reduced, and the meandering channel is starting to reform, even without the in-channel works that we were planning. And then just to finish off on this project, we've got a before and after photo of the view under that central arch of the bridge. So you can see there was a large weir on the left-hand side, and then we've massively reduced that on the right-hand side, and the fish are able to pass freely up and downstream. Can I have the next slide, please, Celina? Thank you. So the second project I'm going to talk about is one that was completed a few years ago, back in 2020. And this is one that we call quite simply the weirs behind the Red Lion, because that is geographically where they are. So there were 6 small weirs ranging in height between 80 and 150 millimetres in height, preventing fish passage and resulting in fragmented, degraded sections of river with increased sediment deposition. And the objectives, similarly to Water End, were to improve fish passage and reduce the amount of silt that was in the channel and sort of accumulating. Thank you. There were some successes, but there were also some challenges in this project as well. So we did manage to remove 4 of the weirs out of the 6, and we modified a 5th one, and that has enabled the fish migration across a larger stretch of the river. And it also allows for that natural sediment transport, so that the sediment can be moved downstream, but also can accumulate in appropriate places and narrow the river somewhat. However, one weir could not be altered, as agreement could not be reached with the landowner. And we've included a couple of the sketches of options that we put forward for modification or removal of that weir, but unfortunately, we were not able to reach agreement with the landowner over what would happen with that. So we haven't been able to do anything with that one at the moment. It's possible that that project might get taken forward in the future by the Environment Agency or by Affinity Water to try and continue to improve that area. Thank you. Our third project then is Noak Mill, also completed in 2020. And at this location, there was a 1.2 metre high sluice, so quite a large impounding structure, impounding the river for approximately 300 metres upstream and definitely preventing fish passage. And this area was over deep and over wide with an excess of deposited silt, so no spawning habitat for trout, and they couldn't get there anyway. There was heavy overshading by nearby trees, which then reduces the growth of the in-stream plants, reducing the amount of microhabitats that are there for things like invertebrates to live in and thrive in. There was also a low clearance bridge as an access to some houses with a coarse trash screen, and that's what you can see in the photograph. So the trash screen itself could also act as a barrier to fish, as it would trap vegetation and so on over time. And yeah, it was causing a bit of a problem. So next slide shows the successes and the challenges. So we did manage to replace the bridge. So we improved its load-bearing capacity for the benefit of local residents, as well as increasing clearance above the water and ensuring fish passage. And you can see that bridge in the photograph on the right there. So we've got increased clearance, no big trash screen, and the fish can pass freely up and downstream underneath. We were able to reduce the sluice height, significantly reducing the upstream impoundment and allowing fish passage. We narrowed the upstream channel, and we carried out some tree works to allow more light into that channel, encouraging the in-channel and riparian plant growth. And I think we've got some more photos on the next slide. So you can see the before and after of the sluice structure. These are taken from almost exactly the same position. And in the first one, you can barely even see the river because the water is going so slowly that there's lots of accumulated vegetation that's growing there, very still water. Can't see the gravel. You can also barely see the gap in the sluice. So there's a structure there and sort of the top right-hand side, which is where the sluice is. But when you look at the photograph on the right, you can see almost a keyhole going through there where we've opened up that sluice, and you can see that the water is flowing freely downstream through that. And of course, that fish would be able to swim upstream through that as well. And then on the next slide, we've got a couple of photos of the upstream section. So the before photo shows where it's really wide, really deep, lots of silt, lots of slow water, not a great habitat for our native invertebrates and fish. And then on the right-hand side, just during construction, where we're narrowing the channel quite significantly, which means that you'll get much faster flow, and then it will keep the gravels clean of the silt, and then make a much better habitat for the invertebrates and spawning fish. The next project I'm going to talk about is one called Homeward Farm, which unfortunately we were not able to deliver. So we do try and find the successes everywhere, but unfortunately some of the projects that we look at, we are not able to take to a conclusion. So the pressures here were heavy grazing by horses who had unrestricted access to the channel, and that leads to a lack of bankside and in-channel vegetation, and also erosion from those horses having unrestricted access. That can lead to widening of the river and also more sediment entering the channel. And that's what you can see on the right-hand side there. And as I visited this site over the years, I could see it getting wider and wider year on year. And that, of course, means the water gets more and more spread out, goes slower. You get more silt deposition as well. So it's degrading the quality of the habitat. There were also 3 small weirs in various states of repair, which prevented fish passage at low flows. And the photograph on the right actually shows the location of one of those weirs, which in this particular photograph is not present, but was at some point reinstated as a set of stepping stones by the tenant. So it sort of varied over time how impounding or how problematic that was. The objectives here were to remove the weirs as much as we could. As I said, the one upstream that we just saw was not causing too much of a problem, certainly at the start. The middle weir had actually been bypassed by the river already, so we weren't too concerned about that one. But this downstream one was the most, the one that we'd really like to deal with and remove or modify to allow fish to swim up and down in all flows. We wanted to put in some fencing to restrict the grazing extent. And also add some berms to narrow the channel and to encourage greater flow diversity. And we would plant those up to encourage the establishment of bankside and in-channel vegetation. The tenant unfortunately required, well, reasonably, but required that people and horses would be able to cross the channel in each of the 2 fields via bridges or water gates. So they wanted to be able to get from one side to the other, and they wanted the horses to be able to do so as well, which is reasonable, but they were asking for a lot, and it was difficult to find enough benefit from the amount of work that we'd be able to do. The horses' only access to drinking water is the river, so we certainly couldn't have fenced it off entirely and got them to use their land differently because the horses still needed that access. There was also a large stand of Japanese knotweed immediately adjacent to the river, right in the middle of the site, which meant that we had restrictions on where we would be able to work. We didn't want to work within 7 or 8 meters of that because that can increase the risk of spreading the Japanese knotweed. But it was much too large for us to just be able to dig it out and remove it entirely. And also the tenant refused some types of fencing. So the only thing that we would have been able to use was a very expensive metal estate fencing along the edges of the river. We were willing to do that if we could have got the environmental benefit, but unfortunately we weren't able to get to that point, as it says on the next slide. So we could not reach agreement with the landowner and tenant on a design which would satisfy their requirements and also provide sufficient environmental benefit. So we did have to walk away from that project in a river restoration sense. However, they did then apply, with our encouragement, for our Ins Out scheme, which is a invasive species management funding scheme that we run every year. And they were successful in securing funding through that in 2 consecutive years for treatment of the Japanese knotweed. So that has responded well to that treatment, and it's now growing less vigorously, and we hope that they will apply again or continue treatment independently to try and reduce that invasive species. So no big win for river restoration per se, but there was a biodiversity gain. Upper Gadebridge Park is the last project that I'm going to talk about from Affinity Water. And this is one that was completed in 2018. The pressures on the river here, the channel had been moved and straightened at some point in the past, and there were 2 small weirs that were obstructing fish passage. There were also 2 surface water outfalls, which were contributing sediment to the channel and pollutants. So they were taking road runoff that was going straight into the river. Next slide, please. So the successes and outcomes here, both of those weirs were removed, which enabled fish migration. In-channel features were created, such as pools, riffles and berms. A wetland feature was installed to reduce the pollutants and sediment discharging directly into the channel, and we'll see some photos of that in a minute. We did some tree works to allow more light into the channel, to allow a variety of marginal habitats to grow along the river edge and banks. And we also installed a new footpath that you can see in the photograph there, and 2 gravel beach areas for the public to enjoy. So we were also able to increase the public amenity value of the site. This is the before and after of the surface water outfalls. So you can see the left-hand picture, you can just about see there's those 2 outfalls, very muddy, lots of sediment coming through. We weren't able to reduce the amount of sediment being washed off the road. What we were able to do was install the wetland feature, which would allow that sediment to drop out of the water and settle. And then reeds will grow up in that area, and that will help to mitigate that. And it will also prevent a lot of that sediment getting into the river. So it holds it back in that wetland feature. Okay, I'm going to pass back over to Liam to talk about the Gadebridge project, which is just downstream.
Thanks, Sarah. This is the final case study. I've been the project manager for Gadebridge Park since around 2022, from detailed designs through to construction. But the project actually goes back to 2016 or 17 when it was first identified as a priority. I outlined designs produced in 2018, and then planning permission finally granted in 2023. So it's been a long time coming, this project. Our construction, we started on site in 2024 and we finished this year in July. So it's just been finished. To give it a little bit of context, Gadebridge Park is very popular. It's a very important green space in Hemel Hempstead. It's owned and managed by Dacorum Borough Council, who are our partners on this project. This slide and their drone footage in the following slide shows the river. Oh, if you skip back, so a bit hasty there. Shows the river before the project, which highlights some of the issues. Like a lot of chalk streams, the Gade as it flowed through Gadebridge Park had been realigned for a mill. Interestingly, a stakeholder at a recent celebration event after project completion bought a print of a map suggesting this was done prior to the Doomsday Book. So it's a very long, it's been there for hundreds and hundreds of years. But chalk streams have a very long memory, and this has had a big impact on the river's health. The artificial channel is over wide, straight, it's clogged with silt, it's overgrown with unsuitable plants, and it showed little or no chalk stream characteristics. Furthermore, the channel was perched above the groundwater and floodplain, which we are disconnecting from the groundwater. It also exacerbated flooding in the park, but with no flow path back to the channel, the park could remain underwater for months at a time, and this was a key driver for the local authority as well. On the right there, you've got the Environment Agency gauging station and weir, which is an important asset for us, but is a passable to fish. So now, if you go into the next slide, Celina. So this is the drone footage which is before the project was carried out. If you note, we start at the White Bridge in the upstream section. If you were in the park, you'd be forgiven for not knowing that there was a river there at all. It's kind of pushed out of the way. It's very overgrown, let alone a precious chalk stream. On the left here is the area where we carried out the project, and that's the natural valley bottom and where the groundwater is. In the channel, you'll see the impoundment and areas where dogs have eroded the banks. We've had to overcome various challenges through design, not least convincing the local authority it was a good idea to put a river right in the middle of one of their main parks. But they have been really amazing partners, and we've had absolutely fantastic feedback since. As Sarah said as well, the windows for delivery are very short, so not carrying out the works during fish spawning season, bird nesting season, water voles, all those sorts of things create challenges. So yeah, another issue on the Gade as well, which I'll explain in just a second, is to manage the drainage in the park. Historically, the natural springs of the Gade had just been piped into a flood relief channel, which is beautifully pure, clean groundwater just being wasted away. So we were looking to reconnect that as well, which will have a big impact downstream. And so yeah, our solution was to create a brand new channel in the middle of the park, reconnecting the channel to its groundwater and floodplain. So if you go to the next slide, we'll see some drone footage of the river being transformed. So this is we're starting from the downstream tie-in of the completed project. We start by going through an area, a very historic, the grounds of a historic building. So we had to be very careful in this area about archaeology. We had to put the course of the river to avoid some sensitive archaeology. We left the roots of a tree there in the channel, so to add to a bit of habitat. This is our new ultrasonic gauging station, which was constructed. This is the biggest piece of engineering as part of the project. It's passable to fish. So yeah, as we go up through, you can see that the river is now right in the middle of the park, allowing people to access it, get closer to nature, experience a natural chalk stream. We planted thousands of characteristic chalk stream plants, as well as retranslocating some plants from the old channel, so it's already looking established. Although the land to the left, this is just after project completion, the seeding and reinstatement hasn't really taken hold. This is like I say, a big benefit was getting people closer to nature. So we installed a new footbridge, new paths. There's a mammal shelf there to allow to improve the green corridor. Here is a beach, an access point, allowing the public and dogs to get into the river without disturbing up and downstream. Lots of geomorphological features, bars, riffles, ponds. Here's interesting on your right. This is the spring drainage. So that's the pipe that's discharging the groundwater that was just discharging to the flood relief culvert back into the channel. So that gives much more stable flows, resilience to low flows, and it's just crystal clear water as it exits that. And there's the upstream tie-in at the end there with the White Bridge. Interestingly, the Environment Agency would have preferred to gone further upstream there into that area, and we would have connected with the Upper Gadebridge Park project that Sarah just explored. However, the White Bridge was deemed too much of a heritage asset to impact. It's grade 2 listed, maybe grade 2 star listed. And the impact of that space to the council at the time when we were going through outline designs, it was deemed not possible. it's worth noting that subsequently, when we've presented to the councillors and we've presented to the council, there's a real drive now to get that project done because they've seen the benefits in the lower section. It's just a shame we couldn't do it at the time. But yeah, moving over to Celina.
Thank you very much, Liam. So as you can imagine, there were many lessons learned across the 6 projects we've talked about. In the table, you will see the common lessons from a client's perspective that impacted our budget and programs. The majority of our projects are not on land that we own, so the success of the projects rely heavily on landowners allowing us to undertake the works. They do influence our projects, and the key is to understand what success looks like to them, as their interests and drivers may not be restoration of the chalk stream. For example, Note Mill landowners, it was a new bridge. Gay Bridge took place in a public park, so they were also keen on social aspects and benefits to the river restoration project. One of the other key lessons that we've learned is there's a lack of existing as-built records. This has meant that we had to undertake additional site investigations, which had to be done either during design and during construction stage, which has impacted our program and costs. And then just conscious of time, the other lessons was around heritage and archaeology. So Gay Bridge had a lot of archaeological searches done before the project could get completed. And also, as you're aware, river restoration projects, we're working in channels, so we are very sensitive to rainfall impacting construction because due to health and safety reasons, we can't work in high flows. These areas are susceptible to flooding. So we had to manage, it was key to understand like when we are constructing and have flexibility and a good risk budget to maintain the impact of the delays on the project. If programs are pushed out, this may mean that we are having to work in ecological constraints, which means that we have to put additional mitigation measures in place, which could be quite costly to us as well. So there's just a summary of some lessons learnt, and we can move on to questions now. So I'm just going to pull up.
Yeah, I can't see that there's any questions in the Q&A actually, but if anyone does have any, then please feel free to put them in or pop your hand up and we can take live questions as well. I can see we've still got a hand up from Gary Cuts. I don't know if that was, I think you've had your hand up for a while. I hope that wasn't a technical issue that you were struggling with.
Oh, I do see the Q&A actually, so we've got
yes,
a mic.
I've got one in the Q&A now. So thank you, Mike. So he said there were some lovely projects with a good variety of solutions to different issues. Do you have any examples of projects undertaken in embanked or deeply dredged chalk streams nearly 2 meters deep, especially ones where you might only have the ability to affect one bank due to landowner constraints? That is a really good question. I'm racking my brain to see if I'm sure you are as well, Celina, of any that we've delivered in the last few years. I can think of some rivers that we've got on our program now that would apply to. So we may need to try and address that.
On the we had to we had some quite highly dredged embanked sections, and we tried to reconnect. We created a bit of lowering the banks and reconnecting to create a wetland area with some in-channel features, so some berms and things like that was a technique we used in that area. That's just been completed this week actually. But 2 meters, it wasn't 2 meters. That sounds quite extreme.
Oh, we've got an interesting question from Ellis Morgan. Thank you for that one. So what are the criteria that you use to decide when to plant trees and when to clear them? Which is such a good question, because we've talked both about planting trees and also about doing tree works to reduce shading. Some shade is really important for a chalk stream because especially with climate change, they can warm up in a hot summer. And it can change the temperature of the water that is flowing through the river. So you do want some shade. We tend to say that we like to see dappled shade of between 40 and 60% of the river surface, depending on whether you're looking at a catchment scale or on a site-based scale. So if there's lots of trees really close to the river and overhanging and creating a lot of shade, and there's no vegetation in the channel, then I would be looking to do some tree works, and ideally use the wood from that in the works as well, so creating woody deflectors and so on. But if there's not really any trees, then you might want to add some trees to create some shade. But Celina, Liam, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, because we're looking for like a dappled effect. So it's I can't remember the percentages, but it's shading and non-shading as you go across. So it's just finding that balance between shade and light.
Yeah, we had a lot of discussion. We had similarly the project I was just referring to on the Ver. It was almost entirely tree work. So we had a lot of discussions and a lot of engagement with stakeholders and riparian owners to explain why we're looking to reduce tree coverage in that area. And it's quite perverse like to say that we're improving the environment by removing trees, and it can get quite emotive, but we would look to plant trees away from the river. We'd focus on fast growing self-seeding trees like sycamores and removing them, and concentrate on the native trees, thinning, pollarding, those sorts of things to try and build up to try and get to the solution we want. It all stems from a kind of from a tree survey where we look at the impact of coverage in those areas. So it's you look at a holistic view about what trees are having the most impact, and which are suitable to remove or reduce the cover of. So it's like with all things, it's a lot of difficult conversations. It's a bit of an art, not a science. There's no kind of like you say, there's a 70, 30, 60, 40 sort of rule of shaded cover, but it's very specific to the sort of reach you're looking at, I think.
Okay. We also have an interesting question around timescales from Will. So Liam touched on timescales of the Gatebridge project, but with regards to the other projects that we mentioned, what were the timescales from start to finish? I can say for the Gatebridge projects, so that covered Noak Mill, Upper Gatebridge Park, and the weirs behind Red Lion Park. Was there anyone and Noak Mill? So they spanned over a 5-year period. So they were a package of works where it took approximately, I think, from start to finish for each site, maybe a couple of years, depending on landowner relationships. Upper Gatebridge Park was the first one because we had a good relationship with Decorum landowners, Decorum Council, so they were keen to see improvements as a river restoration project. But Noak Mill maybe took a little bit longer because we had to really bring the landowners on the journey and convince them to support on undertaking the works and understanding what their drivers were. So it really depends on landowner relationships, I would say, for the projects, unfortunately. I mean, once you've got them on board, from design to construction, it can move quite quickly. But yeah, it's just very much early engagement with landowners. I suggest kind of optioneering, getting them involved and just seeing what they're happy. But what we have noticed across the grade is once the project has been completed, we've been able to showcase it as to other landowners, and then they're able to realize what a chalk stream could look like and the benefits. So it has really opened up a lot more projects and stakeholders kind of keen to see what's done. So it does help once you've got one project, it does have a bit of a knock-on effect actually. So that's great. Thank you, Will, for your question. So sorry, there's quite a lot coming through. So just flicking through. Oh, Gary, who had his name his hand up earlier. So what advice would you give for persuading landowners to let projects implement natural flood management projects on their land, Gary? So none of these drivers have been natural flood management. They've been restoration projects. So it's been a bit of a different journey for us.
I suppose,
yeah.
Celina,
Yeah.
you could argue Gilbert did have aspects of natural flood management, and that's how we actually used the council to explain that. We used that as a benefit to the council, because they were impacted by the ponding in the park. It was underwater for a long time. There was, and we could explain that we could create a flow, create a flow path back. It's not really it's not a classic natural flood management project, and we're not improving flood risk to any properties or anything, but it's about, I suppose, finding what the drivers to the different stakeholders are, understanding what their positions are, and using that to build up that's Sarah says, involving them in the production of the designs, and making sure that you can find mutual benefits.
Okay, a couple of other questions in the chat. I can see one from Ross, which is an interesting one around weirs and silt. So when you have removed a weir, have you had to remove the silt upstream, or just let it go downstream in a controlled way? And I mean, the short answer to that is we definitely can't just let the silt carry on downstream in an uncontrolled way. So thank you for the bit in brackets. You're absolutely right. We wouldn't be allowed to do that. Anytime that we've got an impoundment or a weir, there's one thing I didn't really mention, but you should always consider whether you need an impoundment license in order to modify or to remove that weir. So that's definitely something to look at. You would get that from the Environment Agency and work with them to come up with, make sure that you're doing it in the right way. There are some exemptions to that. So very small weirs can usually be exempted, but you do still have to engage with the Environment Agency on that. As part of that process, and as part of the flood risk activity permitting process, you would need to evidence what your silt control plan is, to make sure that it's not just going to be released at random or in an uncontrolled way. So in terms of what we've done with silt, there's a couple of different options. So often we will try and dig out the silt and use it as part of the berms and things that we might be creating. So reuse it on site. In some cases, we would have to dig it out and then dispose of it off site, which is not really a preferred option if we can avoid it. Or we would usually have silt control measures in place as well. So effectively silt nets that would catch that silt as it travels downstream, anything that does kind of escape any other measures, so that it can be collected and removed. But I'll pass over to Liam and Celina as well, if you've got any further comments on silt management with weir removal.
Yeah, similar to you. So we obviously silt management, it could cause like a fish kill, so that's what you want to avoid. So we did have silt blankets in the channel, so we'd carefully work with the designers to look at how we remove it, and it could just be a slow approach. So you're not removing all the weir in a couple of days. You're phasing the approach, so allowing the silt to be caught in the silt curtain, and then so you're not dealing with a large volume of silt coming down. You're doing a phased approach, phased demob. So it's working with the Environment Agency's fisheries and biodiversity teams and making sure that they're happy with that method that we're using. So I would suggest engaging with the Environment Agency and making sure that the method is approved by them to reduce any risk of issues. Yeah.
Thank you. We've got a couple of questions around funding, which is quite interesting as well. So I can see one from, I've lost it now. I can see one from Howard Simpson. So with many degraded rivers in Cornwall, do you have any advice on how to gain support from partners and generate funding for projects? And then also one from Will, could you also touch on the funding mechanisms for the projects? So from an Affinity Water perspective, there's something called the Water Industry National Environment Programme, or WINEP. And the work that we do as a river restoration team comes under that. So we will make commitments in our business plan every 5 years that are agreed with Ofwat, and Ofwat we will come to an agreement with Ofwat on how much money we will be allowed to spend on that. And so our funding for these projects kind of comes from the capital that the business has, but I'm aware that it can be a lot more complex for other organisations because you need to get funding from other sources. I know that some of our partners have managed to get things like HLF funding. I know that the Environment Agency have some funding streams they can use themselves and are sometimes open for application for others as well. So, Celina, Liam, I don't know if you've got any other thoughts on funding.
May have to pass this one on Liam. To
Liam. So Gadebridge was much larger and costlier than our usual river restoration scheme, and we were able to, because it involved an EA flood asset that was having a negative impact on the environment, we were able to tap into a different revenue stream and to fund the project. Most of our funding for chalk rivers comes from water resources, which I think is available to third parties, and there's WEEF funding as well. I'm not a funding expert, but if you have a specific question about funding, get in touch and I can share it with the relevant teams.
So you mentioned by Louise Morgan, so you mentioned increased water draining into the river that you welcomed, and pollution from water draining from land that you avoid. What is the difference?
I think I think that's related to Gadebridge when I said.
Yeah.
So the area where we created the new channel would have been where is the valley bottom where the river naturally would have been. So when the river's been perched up high, you're disconnecting the river from that area. So when it rains and when groundwater is high, you get a ponding in that area. By realigning the river through the natural bottom, that water is carried in the channel, so it's much more natural, and it's, you'd hope, not polluted. With the pollution is usually in the Upper Gadebridge project was road runoff and surface water drainage.
And there were a lot of misconnections as well, so there was a lot of pollutants coming in from misconnections of household pipes kind of going into wastewater. They were going into surface water pipes, so we're seeing a lot of pollutants coming in on Upper Gadebridge Park, which is why we took that approach to try and filter the pollutants before it entered into the channel, so it's a bit of a buffer. Yeah.
Okay, we've got a few other questions in there. I'm aware we've got about 5 minutes left. So have a quick look. So got some questions. Well, another question from Gary. So what advice would you give for persuading landowners to let projects be implemented, to implement NFM, so natural flood management projects on their land? I mean, the short answer to that is it can be really difficult. And I think it is just a case of trying to build that relationship up over time, evidencing and showing them case studies of places where it has worked well. But ultimately, landowners, particularly if they're agricultural landowners or farming landowners, they might really struggle to give up land that is productive for them, and providing them with a revenue stream to then not have a revenue stream. There, in some cases, may be subsidies that are available for things like when the ELMS scheme eventually comes in, whether there is any subsidy for people keeping water on the land or for restoring rivers or leaving buffer zones and things like that. That will be really helpful. Yeah, I mean, it can be really challenging is the short answer to that one. And it's about evidencing the good that it does in the environment.
We've got a question from Daniel. So what proportion of the chalk streams do these projects represent? And are further projects within the catchments proposed to continue the improvements? So the first part of the question, I mean, we focus, our catchment is Hertfordshire, North London. So I think we said there were 28 chalk streams in that catchment. I don't know what that represents as a percentage nationally, but to the second part of your question, yes, there are, you know, like we said earlier on in the presentation, we have identified 160 sites where we would like to undertake river restoration works, and that's a range that ranges in scale from tree works right down to the similar projects to what we've shared today, and that is also delivering through partners as well. So we are continuing to very much work on these rivers going forward.
Yeah. The statistic that we give is that across the southeast of England, so a bit of a larger area, but across the southeast of England, you find roughly 85% of the world's chalk streams. So it's a large percentage of the global population, if you like, of chalk streams that are in this part of the world. So it's a big responsibility, I guess, a big privilege for us to be able to work with them and to try to protect them. And yes, from an Affinity Water perspective as well, further projects within these catchments are proposed. So of the 33 water bodies that we're working on in the next 5 years, the vast majority of those are chalk stream water bodies. There's a couple that aren't, but that does include the upper gauge that we've been talking about. So we are looking to deliver another project on this in this water body in the next 5 years. It's in quite early conceptual stages at the moment, so I haven't really got any detail. But we're also planning to do one on the downstream water body and lots of other projects across our supply area as well.
Brilliant. I think that brings us nicely to a close. So thank you all for the interesting discussions and questions. And we hope you enjoyed the presentation. And like I said, you could, if you fancy watching it again, you can find it on the CIWEM YouTube channel. So thank you very much.